Why was everyone suddenly silent when the colonel asked a simple question? The operations center buzzed with static and tension. Maps flickered. Radios hissed. The desert sun outside beat against the walls of the Marine Corps Air-Ground Combat Center, turning every breath of air into a slow burn. Lieutenant Colonel James Hartman stood before the tactical display, jaw set, voice steady but carrying the edge of disbelief. "Can anyone here fly a helicopter?" No one answered. The silence was heavy. Men who'd led missions across continents lowered their eyes to the glowing screens as if the answer might be written somewhere on the satellite feed. Outside, 5 Marines were pinned down in Canyon Mesa, their training exercise turned ambush. One was bleeding out, and the enemy had locked every route of escape. Every pilot asset in range was grounded or hours away. Hartman's voice hardened. "Anyone, I don't care rank or status, if you can put a bird in the air, step forward." At the edge of the room, near the visitor's desk, a woman in a gray t-shirt and dusty jeans froze. She wasn't supposed to be there. She'd come to pick up her daughter from a school field trip, not to stand inside a crisis command post. But something in that question, that one word, fly, reached into her like a hook. Emma Reeves looked down at her hands. They were trembling, not from fear, at least not yet, but from recognition. 3 years ago, that same word had defined her life. Fly. When she finally raised her hand, the motion was small, almost reluctant. "I can," she said. Heads turned. A few Marines blinked, unsure if they'd heard her right. A woman in civilian clothes. No name tag, no insignia, dust on her boots and tired eyes. Hartman stared for half a heartbeat. "You can fly rotary wing." "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "Former Marine pilot, M364. The colonel's gaze sharpened, recognition flickered in his expression. But before he could speak, the operations room erupted with fresh updates. A corpsman shouting about blood loss, coordinates shifting, radios chirping distress calls that felt like ghosts whispering through static. Emma lowered her hand slowly. She could still walk away. Pretend it wasn't her problem. Pretend she hadn't just heard that desperate edge in the colonel's voice, the kind she used to know too well. But the thing about silence in a room full of warriors is that it has weight. And she'd just broken it. 6 hours earlier, she'd been exactly where she wanted to be, alone above the fields of Prescott Valley. The desert stretched beneath her like a quilt of green and gold squares, geometric perfection under a blazing sky. Her Bell 206 Jet Ranger drifted low over the alfalfa fields, releasing a fine mist of pesticide in long, precise arcs. Flying crop dusters wasn't glamorous, but it was predictable, and predictable meant safe. The turbine hummed like an old friend. The horizon shimmered, mountains distant and calm. Her headset crackled with a familiar drawl. "Emma, you about done with Henderson's property. Got another lined up if you're interested." Frank Sullivan, old Army warrant officer, now running agricultural aviation like it was still a military outfit. "Almost finished here," she replied, banking the helicopter. "What's the job?" "Wilson Ranch, cotton fields, pays double, they're behind schedule." Emma ran the numbers in her head: fuel consumption, wind direction, sunlight left in the day. The kind of mental math she couldn't unlearn. "I'll take it. 2 hours to refuel and reload." "Copy that. Try not to outfly my maintenance schedule again." His laugh crackled through the radio, half gravel, half affection. Emma smiled faintly, watching the field beneath her fade into a blur of motion and memory. Flying had once meant survival. Now it just meant income. But it still quieted the noise in her head, the noise that came in the dark hours around 3:00 a.m., when she woke drenched in sweat, hearing voices that weren't there. Orders, screams, the dull thud of a helicopter engine that wasn't hers anymore. Up here she could breathe. She guided the Jet Ranger toward the hangar complex on the western edge of town, sunlight flashing across the instrument glass. Below, the desert scent, sage and dust and creosote drifted through open vents. Her hands moved automatically, steady, precise. A Marine once told her that flying was just controlled falling. Emma used to laugh at that. Now, she thought he might have been right. When she touched down, the skids kissed the concrete so gently it barely made a sound. Frank was already walking toward her, wiping his hands on a rag stained with oil and time. "Clean run?" he asked. "Perfect," she said. "No drift, no wind shear, she's running smooth." Frank nodded, eyes glinting with quiet respect. "You fly like someone who's done this longer than most of my crew combined." She said nothing, checking the tail boom, running her fingers along the fuselage. She always checked six, always left a line of sight to the exit. Old habits. "Marine Corps, right?" Frank said softly. She froze for a second. "Does it matter?" "Only if it affects your flying, which it hasn't," he smiled faintly. "But for what it's worth, I recognize the look. You don't turn your back to doors. You scan every room. You park for quick departure. You've seen things you wish you hadn't." Emma's eyes drifted toward the helicopter again. "That life behind me." "Maybe," Frank said, "but you still fly like you've got brothers counting on you." She didn't answer, just grabbed her gear bag and walked toward her truck. Prescott Valley shimmered in midday heat as she drove past the diner and the quiet stretch of road leading toward the elementary school. Her daughter's class, Anna, 3rd grade, was supposed to be returning from a field trip to 29 Palms Marine Base. Emma had signed the permission slip with a shaky hand. Her daughter, bright-eyed, curious, and fearless, wanted to see real helicopters. "Just like Mom used to fly," Anna had said. Emma hadn't corrected her. Some truths were too heavy for a child. Her phone buzzed as she pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. A text from Maggie Nakamura, wife of one of the maintenance chiefs at the base. "Kids running late. Training exercise went sideways. Nothing dangerous. Delay about an hour." Emma stared at the words. Training exercise went sideways. Her throat tightened. She took a deep breath, in for 4, out for 4, just like the therapist had taught her. This isn't Afghanistan, she told herself. This isn't the Hindu Kush. Anna's safe. But she was already starting the truck. An hour later, the sun was dropping lower when the base gates came into view. Marines in full gear checked IDs, their youth making her ache. She flashed her paperwork. "Here for the Prescott Elementary Field Trip Group." The corporal at the desk, Foster, his tag read, nodded politely. "Ma'am, we've got a temporary lockdown. All visitors safe inside the center, but we'll need to hold you until clearance." "Is anyone hurt?" He hesitated. "Nothing confirmed, just precautionary." She caught it, the microsecond delay before the word precautionary. The same kind of delay she'd heard in debriefings before bad news. Inside the visitor center, the smell of old carpet and crayons filled the air. 2 teachers tried to maintain control over a cluster of restless 3rd graders. When Anna spotted her, she sprinted across the room, hair flying. "Mom, you should have seen it. Real helicopters. And Marines with night vision helmets." Emma laughed softly, hugging her tight. "That's incredible, baby. You'll have to tell me everything when we get home." "Can we stay a little longer?" Anna asked. "They said we might see one land if the exercise ends soon." Before Emma could answer, the door burst open. A young staff sergeant, radio in hand, face pale, stepped in. "Ma'am," he said to the teacher, "I need to speak with the trip coordinator immediately." Mrs. Henderson stood up. "What's happening, Sergeant?" "Ma'am, we're implementing a temporary hold. Priority movement on all base roads. No one leaves until further notice." Emma watched him closely. His posture, his tone, the slight shake in his hand. It wasn't a temporary hold. It was containment. She rose slowly. "Sergeant," she said, stepping forward, "what's actually going on out there?" He blinked, eyes flicking to her. Civilians didn't talk like that, not with that tone. Ma'am, I'm not authorized to share operational. Are there casualties? She interrupted quietly. Is this about a training accident or something else? He hesitated again. Ma'am, are you military? Former, she said. Marine Corps Captain, HM 364, Rotary Wing. Recognition flashed. Captain Reeves, from Kandahar Operations. Her chest tightened. That was a long time ago. Yes, ma'am. But right now, Colonel Hartman's trying to reach anyone with flight experience. We've got 5 Marines trapped in Canyon Mesa, pinned down, 1 critical. No aircraft available. Emma stared at him, the words slicing straight through her composure. 5 Marines, pinned, 1 dying. I can't help you, she said sharply. I don't fly missions anymore. Ma'am, if we don't get them out, they die within hours. Please, the colonel's desperate. She turned toward Anna. Her daughter was watching, wide-eyed, already piecing things together. Mom, are you going to help them? Emma knelt. I don't know yet, sweetheart. Anna's small hands clutched her sleeve. You're the best pilot in the world. You always say Marines never leave anyone behind. The words landed like a blade. Emma looked back at the sergeant. Take me to Colonel Hartman. The operations center felt like stepping into a memory she'd buried alive. Radios squawking. Technicians hunched over maps. The air thick with stress and caffeine. Hartman turned as she entered, eyes narrowing in disbelief before softening into something like hope. Captain Reeves, he said, then corrected himself. Emma, Sergeant Palmer briefed me. You flew medevacs out of Kandahar. Yes, sir, 3 years ago. I read the report, he said. 12 lived because of you. 6 didn't, she replied. Hartman nodded slowly. And now 5 more won't unless someone gets to them. She moved closer to the tactical display, instinct taking over before permission. The canyon spread in topographic lines. She could already see wind direction, elevation, LZ geometry. What assets do you have? She asked. None, Hartman admitted. Every bird's grounded or deployed out of state. Closest air support's 4 hours away. Emma exhaled. Tours, the wounded Marine, how long does he have? 2 hours, maybe less. What about civilian airlift? Already checked. Life flights committed. We're at the bottom of their list. The old ache returned, the one that lived somewhere between duty and dread. The same one she'd felt 3 years ago in the Hindu Kush when her call had saved 12, but condemned 6. She turned toward Hartman. What aircraft do you have on this base? A civilian Huey firefighting contractor. Needs certification. Chief Nakamura says it can fly, but barely. Emma's mouth went dry. You want me to take an uncertified bird into a live fire zone? I'm asking if you're willing to try. The room had gone still, everyone listening. She looked at the display again, at the flashing red markers, where 5 Marines waited for a miracle that wasn't coming. Then she thought of Anna, waiting in the visitor center, thought of the promise she'd made to never risk herself again. Her heart beat once, hard, decisive. Show me the aircraft, she said quietly. No promises, I just want to see it. As she followed the sergeant out, she caught her reflection in the glass. A civilian mother in dusty jeans, and behind her eyes, the ghost of the Marine she used to be. And for the first time in 3 years, that ghost was awake. The hangar smelled like dust, jet fuel, and ghosts. Emma stopped in the doorway, letting her eyes adjust from the blinding desert light to the dim interior of Hangar 7. A hulking shape loomed in the shadows, the Bell A-1H Huey, its olive paint faded to a weary green, panels hanging open like ribs. Mechanics moved around it in grim choreography, their tools clattering against metal that looked older than some of the Marines on base. Chief Warrant Officer Robert Nakamura stepped out from under the fuselage, wiping his hands on a rag that would never be clean again. His posture carried the slow carefulness of someone who'd ejected once and paid for it in scar tissue. "You're the pilot?" he asked, voice flat. "Hartman said you'd take a look." Emma nodded. "I'll look, no promises." He studied her civilian clothes, steady eyes, that old-school military calm people either had or didn't. Then he gestured toward the helicopter. "She's a firefighter bird. Been grounded 6 months. Transmission wear, hydraulic leaks, a few gremlins I don't have parts to chase, but she'll get off the ground." Emma walked a slow circle around the Huey, palm trailing along its skin. The metal was cool despite the heat. Every scar told a story, heat scoring on the engine cowlings, pitted rotor edges, stress marks along the tail boom. She crouched, checking landing skid welds, then straightened, eyes distant. "What's her hour count?" 8,000, mostly low-level firefighting runs. Transmissions right at tolerance. Hydraulics? Leaking but stable. Flight controls? He hesitated. "You'll feel play in the cyclic, collective sticky. She'll fight you." Emma exhaled through her nose, calculating risk the way some people calculated groceries. "She'll fly." Nakamura tilted his head. "You sound sure." "I didn't say for how long." A voice echoed from behind them. "Captain Reeves." Major Sarah Donovan strode in crisp uniform, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp enough to cut through excuses. She carried a tablet under her arm and the posture of someone who'd been up since before dawn. "Colonel Hartman wants you briefed," she said. "Enemy force composition, terrain, timelines." Emma wiped her hands on her jeans. "Go ahead." Donovan brought up satellite images, red dots clustered around a jagged canyon. 15 hostiles, coordinated movement, overlapping fields of fire. "We think mercenaries, professional. They're not trying to kill our people, they're studying us." "Studying us?" "Testing response time, measuring capability, probably streaming every move to someone who shouldn't be watching." Emma's stomach tightened. So it wasn't just rescue anymore, it was theater, a demonstration. Every second of hesitation, every mechanical failure would be recorded, dissected, replayed. "Who's there wounded?" "Corporal Danny Torres, shrapnel to the chest. Sergeant Rachel Kim's keeping him alive with field dressings and prayers. 2 hours, maybe less." 2 hours? Emma walked to the Huey's cockpit, peered inside. The smell of hydraulic fluid and burnt oil pulled her back to memories she'd fought to bury, the tight hum of rotors, the bark of gunfire through an open door, the heartbeat ticking in her teeth when someone screamed for extraction. Behind her, heavy boots approached. A tall Marine with a salt and pepper beard stopped at her shoulder. His name tape read Washington. "Master Sergeant Leon Washington," he said, voice gravel wrapped in calm authority. "I flew with Colonel Hendress back when you pulled that medevac through the Kandahar storm." Emma didn't look up. "That was a lifetime ago." "She still talks about it," Washington said. "Said you threaded a bird through zero visibility and enemy fire without losing a soul." Emma's jaw clenched. 6 men died in the Hindu Kush." He nodded slowly. "And 12 lived because of you. That's what leadership looks like when it's ugly." She finally faced him. "You weren't there." "No, ma'am, but I've buried men because someone froze when it mattered. You didn't." He stepped closer. "You walked away afterward, sure, but you didn't fail." The hangar had gone quiet. Mechanics pretended to work while their ears stayed tuned. Emma looked back at the Huey. Its dull surface caught slivers of sunlight, like an old soldier wearing faded metals. "You really think this thing will make it in and out?" Washington shrugged. "Doesn't matter what I think, only whether you believe it can." Silence, then her voice low. "Some debts don't go away." Minutes blurred. Mechanics swarmed the aircraft with renewed focus, patching, checking, cursing. Hydraulic lines tightened, panels sealed, ammo belts fed into side-mounted M240s. The smell of sweat and jet fuel thickened until it felt like part of the air. Lieutenant Commander Grace Patterson entered, Navy medical insignia glinting in the dim light. Her gloves hung from one hand like a reminder of purpose. "Captain Reeves," she said briskly, "if you pull Torres out alive, I'll have surgical staff ready, but he's bleeding internally. 90 minutes before irreversible shock, less if the flight's rough." "What are his odds if I make it back within that window?" 70%, Patterson said. "Drop below that and I'm not God." Emma nodded. "Then I'll give you 70. "Give me him breathing," Patterson said. "I'll handle the rest." When the surgeon left, another officer approached, younger, intense, intelligence folder under his arm. "Captain Brandon Mitchell," he said. "We the enemy leader, Dmitry Vyulov, ex-Spetsnaz, runs a mercenary outfit specializing in infiltration exercises. If he's here, this isn't random." "Meaning?" "Meaning you're not just rescuing Marines. You're performing for hostile analysts. Everything you do becomes data." Emma frowned. "Then they'll see what desperation looks like." Mitchell almost smiled. "They'll see what courage looks like if you pull it off." Before she could answer, another voice, older, worn, came from the hangar door. "Emma." Sheriff Tom Briggs stood there, hat in his hands, civilian uniform dusty from the drive. Familiar face, familiar worry. "Maggie called me, said you're here, said they might send you up." Emma straightened. "Anna with her." "She's fine at our house, but Emma," he stepped closer, voice gentler, "you don't owe the Corps anything. You've built a life. You've got a daughter who already lost her father. Don't make her lose you too." The words hit harder than any order. "Tom," she said quietly, "if I walk away, 5 families lose someone tonight. I can't teach Anna that's okay." He shook his head, helpless. "You think dying will teach her courage?" "No," she said. "Living with cowardice would teach her shame." Briggs had no answer. He just looked at her, seeing both the mother and the Marine, and stepped back. Nakamura returned with a clipboard, grease streaked across his sleeves. "We've got her ready, but I won't lie. This bird's held together with prayer and lockwear. Transmission bearings are near failure thresholds. You push too hard, they'll seize." "What's the margin?" 30 minutes of flight at high torque, maybe less in this heat. Emma calculated. Canyon Mesa, 23 minutes out, 15 on site, 23 back. 61 minutes total, past the limit. She didn't flinch. "Run the engines up, minimal checks, we're flying." "Ma'am." "Chief," she said, eyes steady. "Either we fly or they die, your call." He swallowed hard, then barked to his crew. "All right, you heard her, spin it up." Metal screamed as rotors were mounted. The hangar filled with motion, tools slamming, boots pounding, hydraulics whining to life. The Huey groaned, waking from forced sleep. Major Donovan returned with flight gear, a scuffed helmet and tactical vest faded from desert dust. "These belong to Captain Sarah Chen," she said softly. "She rotated home last month, figured you could use them." Emma took the vest, the weight of ceramic plates pressing against old bruises. Sliding it on felt like stepping into an earlier version of herself, the one who didn't freeze, didn't doubt, didn't apologize for surviving. The helmet was scratched, visor dull, padding worn to shape. She turned it over once, then lowered it onto her head. The comms crackled alive, filling her ears with the hum of organized chaos. Through the static came Colonel Hartman's voice. "Captain Reeves." "Sir." "I need you to understand something before you lift off," he said. "If this goes wrong, you'll get no benefits, no flag-draped ceremony. The investigation will call it unauthorized flight. You'll be a civilian casualty." "I know," she said. "And if you don't go," Hartman continued, "Torres dies and 4 Marines live with that for the rest of their lives." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the heat radiating from the concrete floor. Courage isn't about winning, she thought. It's about showing up when it matters. "I'm going," she said. Hartman's tone softened. "Then Godspeed, Captain." He clicked off. Washington approached again, holding a folded map marked with colored grease pencil lines. Quick reaction force is staged here, 15 clicks east. Drones overhead. They'll feed you live imagery. Don't trust it too much. The enemy knows we're watching. Emma studied the map briefly. They'll expect high-altitude approach. I'll come in low through the South Wash, terrain masking. Washington nodded, satisfied. You still think like a Marine. Never stopped, she said. Across the hangar, a mechanic shouted, engine test complete. The Huey's turbines whined, building a throaty hum that vibrated through the floor. Rotor blades blurred to life, scattering dust and paperwork in chaotic swirls. Chief Nakamura jogged up to her door, face streaked with sweat. She's ready. But listen, if the transmission temp climbs past red line, you've got seconds before seizure. Don't try to be a hero. Auto-rotate and pray. Emma managed a small smile. Heroes are just people who ran out of options. He slammed the door shut, stepped back, saluted without thinking. Inside the cockpit, she ran her hands across the instruments. Old, faded, but familiar. Switches clicked under her fingertips like old friends whispering welcome back. She took a breath, keyed the radio. Base ops, this is Hammer spooling up. Copy Hammer, we're with you all the way. The engine roared to full power. The Huey shuddered, then lifted, dust exploding outward in concentric rings. The old machine fought gravity, then surrendered, rising into the white-hot sky. Below, Marines shielded their eyes, watching the impossible take shape. A civilian helicopter, half-broken, flown by a woman they barely knew, their last chance against math and time. Emma leveled off, desert stretching ahead like an ocean of heat. Behind her, the base shrank into a blur of sand and sunlight. Ahead, somewhere beyond the ridges, 5 Marines waited, 1 bleeding out, 4 holding the line, and a handful of mercenaries recording every second of American desperation. The Huey's instruments trembled, transmission temperature already flirting with the yellow zone. She gripped the cyclic tighter, adjusting for the gusting crosswinds that shoved at the rotor disc. Her breathing steadied. The world narrowed to gauges, horizon, and the low mechanical heartbeat beneath her boots. "Let's get them home," she whispered. The helicopter tilted forward, accelerating into the desert glare. A relic of another war carrying a pilot who'd sworn never to fight again, racing against time, heat, and her own past. And as the horizon began to shimmer with the first rise of Canyon Mesa's ridgelines, a thought surfaced, quiet, fierce, certain. Some debts aren't paid with time, they're paid with courage. The desert stretched endlessly, a trembling sheet of light and heat. Emma's Huey clawed through the air, every vibration crawling through the seat into her bones. The old helicopter felt alive in the way wounded animals sometimes did, stubborn, tired, but still fighting because stopping meant dying. Wind shear buffeted the tail boom, jerking the nose. Her hands corrected automatically. Left pedal, slight cyclic adjustment, collective steady. Flying was no longer conscious thought. It was muscle memory and faith. "Base ops, this is Hammer," she said into her headset, voice even despite the shaking gauges. "Crossing grid 7-8. Transmission temp climbing past 95%. Major Donovan's calm voice replied through static. "Copy that, Hammer. You're 20 minutes out. Be advised, Canyon Mesa winds are gusting 30 knots cross. Enemy observers confirmed along your approach vector." Emma's eyes flicked to the horizon. Through the wavering heat, the first shadow of the canyon rose ahead, jagged, sun-blasted cliffs biting into the sky. "Understood. I'll drop below ridge line for terrain masking." "Roger, Anvil's expecting contact." She adjusted her course, lowering the Huey toward the desert floor until the sand blurred beneath them in streaks of brown and gold. Each gust punched the fuselage sideways, and the old bird groaned in protest. The smell of heated oil filled the cockpit. Every few seconds, she tapped the temperature gauge with her glove, still climbing. "Stay with me," she muttered. "Just hold it together a little longer." The sound of rotors was hypnotic, wop wop wop, steady and ancient, the heartbeat of 1,000 rescues, 1,000 ghosts. Her reflection in the cracked cockpit glass caught her eye. Sweat glistened on her forehead. Under the helmet, her face looked older, leaner, but her eyes, they were the same eyes that once watched a sandstorm swallow a mountain pass in Afghanistan. She hadn't realized until this moment how much she'd missed this feeling, not the fear, but the focus, the absolute clarity of knowing what mattered and what didn't. Then a flash movement on the ridge ahead. She ducked instinctively, throttling down. The Huey dropped 50 feet. Sunlight caught on glass, a rifle scope. "Base ops, this is Hammer. Visual on enemy observer, ridge line 2 clicks north of approach. Confirmed optics." Donovan's reply came fast. "Copy. Drones show 3 elevated positions with small arms capability. You're in their kill zone, Hammer. Stay low." "I'm already low." The radio crackled again, a new voice, gruff, calm under pressure. "Hammer, this is Anvil Actual, Gunnery Sergeant Webb. We've got your signature. Be advised they see you. Enemy fire incoming." The air filled with metallic pops, tracers slicing the sky. The sound reached her a half-second later, like angry hornets. "Taking fire," she called, dipping behind a rock formation. Bullets tore into sandstone, sending fragments rattling against the fuselage. The helicopter jolted, one rotor blade nicking air pockets that turned into thunder. A deep breath, calm, adjusting course, coming in from southwest vector. Prepare for extraction zone south of your position. "Copy that, Hammer," Webb said. "We've marked LZ with smoke red, Tor's condition critical." Emma banked hard, following the canyon wall so close she could see its layered rock fly past the window. The Huey's frame shuddered violently. Warning light blinked amber. HYD press low. "Don't you dare," she whispered, tapping the gauge. "Not now." She eased collective, giving the system a chance to breathe. Pressure stabilized, barely. Below, the canyon opened, a jagged scar of stone and shadow. The smoke plume rose from the floor like a red flare against God's own anvil. Figures moved, Marines in cover positions, their helmets glinting under the brutal sun. The radio buzzed again. "Hammer, this is Anvil 2, Sergeant Pierce. You've got at least 2 snipers on the northeast ridge, marking their location with tracer fire." "Copy that, I see your red smoke." She dipped lower, heart hammering. The canyon narrowed, no room for error now. She kept her eyes level, hands fluid. A pilot's world shrinks to instruments and instinct in moments like these. Bullets pinged against the hull, sharp metallic thuds. Sparks flashed near the windshield. "Jesus," she muttered, "they're using high caliber." The radio hissed with overlapping voices. "Anvil to Hammer, Tors is coding out. Enemy repositioning, eyes east. Transmission in the red." Emma ignored everything except the essential. Her mind split in layers, one watching the gauges, one flying the machine, one calculating descent rate versus landing zone slope. The ground rushed up. Dust exploded outward as the skids hit. The Huey rocked hard, almost overbalanced, then steadied. "Hammer down," she said. "LZ hot, 2 minutes max." From the canyon's shadows, Marines sprinted through gunfire. Their armor glinted, movements desperate but disciplined. 2 carried a stretcher Tors. His face was pale gray, lips blue, blood soaking through chest dressings. Sergeant Rachel Kim shouted over the rotor noise. "He's fatting." Emma's hands flew across the panel, maintaining rotor RPM. "Load him, move." Bullets cracked overhead. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed the Huey's side. One-door gunner returned fire, short controlled bursts, tracers cutting the air. The weapon jammed. He cursed, clearing it by hand. Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "We're not dying here, move." Kim climbed aboard, still pressing on Tor's wound. The stretcher barely fit in the cramped cabin. Two more Marines jumped in, faces streaked with dust and exhaustion. Everyone set. Set. Hold tight. She pulled collective. The Huey strained, groaned, refused. For a second nothing, and then slowly it lifted. Sand and shell casings swirled in a furious cyclone below. Tracer rounds laced the air. One slammed into the tail boom, metallic shriek. Warning alarm blared. Emma bit back a curse, overcompensating with cyclic input. The helicopter yawed left, then straightened. "Base ops," she said through gritted teeth. "Hammer has package, taking fire, egressing west." "Copy Hammer. Drones tracking your exit. QRF will cover your route." Behind her, Sergeant Kim shouted over the noise. "He's losing pulse." "Stabilize him," Emma snapped. "We're not done yet." The Huey clawed skyward, rotor wash kicking dust into the canyon like a storm. The enemy fire intensified, chasing them upward. One round shattered the side window. Wind screamed through the cockpit. Emma flinched but didn't blink. "Come on, girl, stay with me." The transmission gauge ticked red. Overheat. Every instinct screamed abort. Every part of her training said land before failure. But there was nowhere safe to land, just vertical walls and death waiting below. She eased back on the throttle, trading altitude for survival. The helicopter lurched. Something inside began to whine, the sickening pitch of metal grinding against metal. "Base ops, transmission warning redline, losing pressure." Major Donovan's voice came through, calm but tight. "Understood, Hammer. You're 6 minutes from clear airspace. Can you make it?" Emma's throat felt dry as sand. "I'll make it." She had to. She dropped low again, hugging terrain, using the canyon's jagged edges as cover. Every vibration threatened to tear the machine apart. Behind her, Kim was shouting vitals, numbers that were all wrong. "Pressure's dropping, he's not breathing." "Do what you can," Emma said. "We're almost there." The desert opened before them, sun blazing off the horizon. The Huey roared across the flats, trailing a plume of sand and oil mist. Each second felt stolen. Then a sound, sharp, different. Clank. She glanced at the panel. Transmission temp spiking, hydraulic pressure plummeting. "Come on." She reduced collective, coaxing the system, whispering to it like a living thing. "Don't give up on me now." The engine coughed, not a good sign. The entire frame shuddered as if every rivet was protesting. Through the comms, gunnery Sergeant Webb's voice broke in. "Hammer, you clear of canyon." "Affirmative," she said. "Outbound with wounded. Advise base medical prep for trauma level 1. Silence, then a low, reverent voice. "God bless you, ma'am." She didn't reply. Couldn't. Every ounce of focus belonged to flying this dying machine home. The air grew thicker as she left the canyon. Wind steadied. The base's coordinates shimmered on the horizon like a mirage. 90 knots, 80, 70. She was losing speed, torque dropped from heat fatigue. Inside the cabin, Rachel Kim pressed harder on Tor's chest, blood soaking through her gloves. "Stay with me, Corporal, stay with me." Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. Not again, not this time. 3 years ago she'd left 6 men behind. The guilt never left. She built a life around forgetting, but some debts, they don't forgive silence. Now the same ghosts whispered in the rotor wash. Don't fail them. The base perimeter came into view, chain-link fences, sand-blown hangars, the faint shapes of Marines rushing toward the landing zone. She keyed her mic. "Base ops, Hammer inbound. Transmission failure imminent. Prepare emergency reception." "Copy that, Hammer. You're cleared to land on pad 1. Medical team standing by." "Roger." The Huey coughed again, a deep metallic growl. Warning lights exploded across the panel. XMSN press low. ENG chip detect. God damn it. The machine began to lose lift. She dropped collective to preserve what she could, flaring the nose. The base rushed up fast. "Brace," she shouted. The skids hit hard, bounced, then slammed again. A deafening screech. The Huey spun half a turn, skidding to a stop in a cloud of dust and smoke. The engine coughed once more, then died. For a heartbeat there was silence. Then voices, Marines shouting, medics running. Emma yanked off her helmet, heart pounding. Sergeant Kim and two corpsmen pulled Tors out, transferring him onto a waiting stretcher. His chest rose weakly, but it rose. Patterson, the trauma surgeon, appeared shouting orders. "Move! Get him inside now!" Emma climbed out, legs trembling. The hot air hit her like a wave. She leaned against the Huey's side, feeling its metal still vibrating faintly, like a heart that hadn't accepted it was done. Nakamura sprinted toward her, grease-streaked and wide-eyed. "You're insane," he said breathlessly. "You actually did it." She managed a tired smile. "You built her well." Behind them, the medical team disappeared into the trauma bay. Hartman emerged from the control center, dust coating his boots, expression unreadable. "Report," he said. "5 Marines extracted," Emma replied, voice hoarse. "Tors alive, barely." Hartman nodded once. "You just made half this base believe in miracles again." She looked past him, toward the hangar, toward the fatting red dust cloud where the Huey had landed like a battered angel. "Miracles are expensive," she said quietly. The colonel studied her for a long moment. "You all right, Captain?" Emma's gaze drifted toward the horizon, the direction of Canyon Mesa. "Ask me when I stop shaking." He gave a slow nod. "Fair enough." The radio on his shoulder crackled, voices relaying after-action updates, words like "contact broken," "enemy withdrawal," "no further engagement." The mercenaries were gone. But Emma knew better. They hadn't retreated, they'd observed, learned, and left with everything they wanted. The data was collected, the test complete. And somewhere, across the desert, someone was already analyzing every move she'd made. Still 5 Marines were alive. That would have to be enough. As Hartman turned away, Emma caught sight of a small figure near the perimeter fence. A girl with sun-bleached hair, clutching the hand of a woman in civilian clothes. On it. Her daughter's eyes met hers through the fence, wide, trembling, proud. Emma's throat closed. She lifted a hand, a silent salute. Anna's lips moved. No sound, but Emma could read it clearly. "You did it, Mom." Emma looked back at the Huey, smoke curling from its vents, paint scorched, rotors still ticking as they cooled. She reached out and laid a hand against it one last time. "Yeah," she whispered, "we did." Then she turned toward the medical bay, because courage doesn't end at landing. Sometimes it begins afterward, when the adrenaline fades and the quiet comes rushing in. And in that quiet, Emma Reeves finally understood what redemption sounded like. Not applause, not praise. Just the steady beeping of a Marine's heart monitor, and the whisper of rotors cooling in the sun. The quiet came first. That strange, ringing quiet that follows chaos, when sound still trembles in the air but nothing moves. Emma sat on the edge of the infirmary cot, hands clasped, helmet resting between her boots. Her flight suit, borrowed, blood-streaked, dust-caked, hung loose around her shoulders. Every muscle throbbed. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed faintly, too bright, too clean. Through the thin curtain she could hear muffled voices, medics reporting vitals, a ventilator cycling, the beep of a heart monitor that refused to quit. Corporal Tors was alive for now. She stared at her palms. The skin was raw where the cyclic grip had bitten through her gloves. Faint tremors ran through her fingers. Her pulse hadn't slowed since the crash landing. A soft knock at the metal frame. "Captain Reeves." It was Dr. Grace Patterson. The trauma surgeon still wore her blood-spattered scrubs, hair pulled into a tight bun, eyes rimmed red but steady. "Tors made it through surgery," she said. Collapsed lung, massive blood loss. He'll be critical for a while, but he's breathing on his own. Emma exhaled, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That kid's tougher than I was. Patterson leaned against the doorframe, studying her. You flew him out in a helicopter that should have been in a museum. You don't get to deflect that. Emma managed a faint smile. Doc, I just kept it in the air. That's usually the difference between living and dying, Patterson said quietly. Then, after a pause, Hartman wants to debrief you once you're cleared. You good to walk? Walking easy, Emma said. It's stopping that's hard. The operations center felt different now. Quieter. The frenetic energy that had filled it during the crisis had drained away, replaced by the hum of air conditioning and the smell of stale coffee. Colonel Hartman sat at the head of the briefing table, sleeves rolled, posture carved from fatigue. Washington and Donovan flanked him. Screens along the walls still displayed maps of Canyon Mesa, though the red markers were gone. Emma entered without saluting. She was a civilian again, but old instincts made her straighten unconsciously. Hartman gestured to a chair. Sit, Captain. She did. The vinyl was cold. Hartman slid a folder across the table. Preliminary after-action report. Your flight path, radio transcripts, telemetry data. We've already sent copies up-chain. Up-chain to who? Joint Command and, he hesitated, a few civilian contractors attached to intelligence. Emma frowned. Civilian contractors. Whoever those mercenaries were, they weren't freelancers. They knew our protocols, our response windows. Someone's testing us. Command wants to know how and why. And you think my flight will tell them that? Hartman met her gaze. It already did. He tapped the folder. You broke radio silence twice under fire but never lost signal integrity. Whoever was monitoring learned exactly how fast we can recover, how far we'll go for 5 Marines. That data is gold to the wrong people. Emma's stomach tightened, so I just gave them a live demonstration. Hartman nodded grimly. Yeah, but you also saved 5 lives doing it. She rubbed her temple, trying to process the contradiction, hero and liability in the same breath. Major Donovan leaned forward. We've run analysis on Vulov's team. They vanished before our QRF arrived. No casualties left behind, no tracks we could follow. Clean extraction. That's coordination on a level above merc work. Russian, Emma asked. Probably, but the money trails corporate, private security. They play both sides of the chessboard. Hartman closed the folder. Command wants to talk to you tomorrow. They'll debrief, maybe ask if you'd consider consulting on counter-tactics. Emma let out a hollow laugh. Consulting? I fly crop dusters, Colonel. I'm not your poster pilot. Hartman's tone softened. You're the reason 5 families aren't getting folded flags tonight. That matters. She looked at him, really looked, and saw in his eyes the same exhaustion she'd carried for years. The cost of command, balancing heroism and statistics. After a long silence, she said, You ever get tired of calling survival a miracle? Hartman sighed. Every day. Outside, twilight settled over the desert. The air cooled, the color of the sand deepening to rust and violet. Emma walked alone along the fence line, the faint clang of the chain link vibrating in the wind. Beyond the perimeter lights, the Huey sat on the tarmac, grounded and broken, blades drooping, skin scorched, paint blistered by heat. Mechanics had cordoned it off for inspection, but to Emma it looked less like wreckage and more like a tomb. She placed a hand against the cold metal. You did good, girl, she whispered. You got them home. For a moment she thought she heard it answer, the faint tick of cooling steel, like an exhale. Footsteps behind her. Couldn't sleep either. She turned. Sergeant Rachel Kim stood there in fatigues, arm bandaged, eyes shadowed but alert. Not after what we saw today, Emma said. Kim nodded. I just wanted to thank you. Tors, he's alive because you showed up. Emma smiled faintly. You kept him alive long enough for me to have a reason to. Kim's voice dropped. Ma'am, before you landed, he said something. Barely conscious, he said, tell her not to leave us again. Do you know what he meant? Emma froze. The words hit somewhere deep, a place she hadn't opened in years. No, she said after a pause, but I think I do now. Kim looked puzzled but didn't press. She just nodded respectfully and walked away, boots crunching in the gravel. Emma stayed by the helicopter a while longer, the stars beginning to cut through the haze above. She remembered another night sky, Afghanistan, 2019, the rotor wash mixing with smoke, her co-pilot screaming coordinates through static. The evac she didn't make in time. The sick she couldn't save. She had buried that memory under layers of routine, under motherhood and quiet jobs and sleepless nights. But today had dug it up, raw and unfiltered. The desert wind shifted. In the distance, she heard laughter from the barracks, young Marines celebrating survival the way soldiers always did, loud enough to forget. She envied them their simplicity. When she finally reached the visitor quarters, Maggie Nakamura was waiting outside, arms crossed, worry etched deep. Anna's asleep, Maggie said. She waited up till midnight, wouldn't stop asking if you were okay. Emma's throat tightened. Thank you. Maggie studied her face. You did what you had to. Doesn't mean you won't pay for it later. Emma smiled sadly. That's the story of every Marine I know. Maybe, Maggie said, but you're also a mom. Those two jobs don't always fit in the same body. Emma nodded slowly. I'm starting to realize that. Maggie hesitated, then reached out, squeezing her hand. Get some sleep. The world can wait till morning. Morning came in shards of gold across the desert horizon. The base was already alive. Engines rumbling, boots pounding, radios chattering. Emma stood outside the infirmary window, coffee in hand, watching sunlight spill over the helipad where the Huey had landed. Tors lay inside, connected to tubes and machines, chest rising steadily. Dr. Patterson joined her. Vitals are stable, she said. He's asking for you. Emma blinked. He's awake. Barely, but conscious enough to know you're the reason. Inside, Tors looked impossibly young, pale, hollow-cheeked, but alive. His eyes opened as she approached. Ma'am, he whispered. Don't try to talk, she said gently. He smiled weakly. We heard you quit flying. I did, she said. Guess we're glad you changed your mind. Emma felt her chest tighten. Don't thank me, Corporal. You did your part, I just gave you a ride. He chuckled faintly, then winced from the pain. Best damn ride of my life. She squeezed his hand. Get some rest. The world's still out there waiting for you. As she turned to leave, he murmured something that made her stop. You came back for us. Emma looked over her shoulder. Always. The debrief with command lasted an hour but felt longer. A faceless voice on a secure line asked clinical questions, altitudes, vectors, radio interference. They wanted data, not feelings. When it ended, Hartman caught her in the corridor. They're offering you a contract, he said. Advisory role, civilian pay scale. You train pilots for high-risk extraction scenarios. Emma shook her head. I'm not ready for uniforms again. It wouldn't be uniforms, Hartman said, just purpose. She gave him a look, tired, wary, but not dismissive. Let me think. Take your time, he said. You've earned that much. That night, she and Anna sat on the tailgate of her truck outside the hangar. The stars were endless again. Anna leaned against her shoulder. Mom, everyone at school says you're a hero. Emma smiled softly. Heroes are people who get caught doing what's right when no one else will. Were you scared? Every second. Then why did you go? Emma looked toward the dark outline of the Huey, now grounded forever. Because they needed someone and no one else could. Anna was quiet for a long moment. Is that what Dad would have done? Emma swallowed. I think so. He believed courage doesn't mean not being afraid, it means doing what's right anyway. Anna smiled, small and sleepy. Then I'm glad you were afraid. Emma laughed softly, tears stinging her eyes. Me too, kiddo. They sat there until the wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of oil and sand, and something like peace. Later, when Anna was asleep, Emma returned to the hangar one last time. The Huey rested under a tarp, silent, patient. She touched the metal again and closed her eyes. In her mind, she could still hear the rotors, the radio chatter, the heartbeat of courage echoing through every bolt. She whispered to the darkness, maybe some debts do get paid, not with medals, but with mercy. The desert answered only with silence, but it was a kind silence, the kind that meant understanding. And as dawn began to break again over the base, Emma Reeves finally felt the weight she'd carried for years start to lift. Courage hadn't saved her, compassion had. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The desert looked peaceful again. It always did after blood. From the observation deck above the base hospital, Emma watched the sun climb over the ridgeline, gilding the sand in light that felt too soft for what had happened here. Helicopters hummed in the distance, training flights, not rescues, the kind of noise that used to soothe her. Now it just reminded her that peace never lasted long in places like this. Behind her, a door opened. She didn't turn. Still can't stand goodbyes. Colonel Hartman's voice carried that low, gravel tone of someone who'd buried too many soldiers. Emma gave a faint smile. I thought you'd be busy rewriting my flight into an official report. He stepped beside her, arms crossed. That's the thing about unofficial miracles. They don't fit cleanly into paperwork. Below, medical personnel moved across the courtyard, carrying supplies. Somewhere in that building, Corporal Torres was learning how to breathe without help. Any updates? She asked quietly. Hartman nodded. Stable, vitals improving, he'll make it. Emma exhaled, long and slow. Hartman studied her profile. Command, still talking about that advisory role. You think about it. I thought about it, she said. Still not sure I can wear two uniforms again, Mother and Marine. You wore both just fine 2 days ago. She didn't answer. The silence between them was thick but not uncomfortable. Finally, Hartman said, You know this wasn't random, right? Emma turned. You mean the ambush? He nodded. Intel finished their review. The attackers weren't mercenaries, not exactly. Contracted specialists. Their equipment, their comms, all American-made. Some even registered to one of our own subcontractors. Emma frowned. You're saying we were the target of our own people. I'm saying someone wanted to see how fast we'd respond to a compromised unit, wanted to test our rescue chain, and you were the variable they didn't expect. She stared at him. Test us for what? Hartman looked past her toward the horizon. We're still figuring that out. 3 days later, Emma found herself back at the small civilian airfield near Prescott Valley. Her Bell-Jet Ranger sat gleaming under the sun, freshly refueled, its paint streaked with dust from the last spray run. It should have felt like home. But as she ran her hand along the fuselage, something inside her felt hollow. After the Huey, this machine seemed quiet, too obedient, too safe. Ground still holding your attention. Frank Sullivan leaned against the hangar door, coffee cup in hand, grinning. Heard you made the evening news, local hero and all. Emma groaned, Don't start. Relax. They didn't mention the unauthorized flight part, just the saving lives part. She shook her head. They never mentioned the fine print. Frank studied her a moment. You ever think maybe the fine print doesn't matter? You did something only you could have done. People are alive because of that. I didn't do it for headlines. I know, Frank said. That's what makes it worth reading about. She looked out over the runway. The horizon shimmered heat waves turning the desert into liquid light. Sometimes I wish it was still simple, she said. Up, down, land, home. No questions, no ghosts. Ghosts don't care what job you take, Frank said. They just care if you stop running long enough to listen. Before she could answer, a black SUV rolled onto the tarmac. Two men in dark suits stepped out, not military, but official in a different way. Frank whistled softly. You expecting company? Emma's gut tightened. No. The taller man approached, flashing a badge, Department of Defense, Counterintelligence Division. Captain Reeves. She straightened instinctively. Former captain. He nodded. Ms. Reeves, then. I'm Agent Keene. This is Agent Valdez. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the Canyon Mesa incident. Already gave my statement. This isn't about your statement, Keene said. It's about what came after. Frank shot her a look, the kind that said, you want me to stick around. Emma shook her head. It's fine, Frank. The agents gestured toward a nearby bench. It won't take long. She sat, arms crossed. All right, what's this about? Valdez flipped open a tablet showing satellite images. This is Canyon Mesa, 48 hours after your extraction. We sent a recon team. The site was stripped clean, casings, tracks, even the smoke canisters. Whoever was there didn't just retreat. They sanitized. Emma frowned. You expected evidence. We expected a trace, Keene said. But here's the thing, our satellite telemetry recorded a second aircraft in the area minutes before you arrived. No call sign, no radar tag. It shadowed your path for 10 miles, then vanished. She stared at the image. You think I had help? We think someone wanted to make sure you succeeded, Valdez said. Or make sure you were seen succeeding. Emma's pulse quickened. Seen by who? That's what we're trying to find out. Keene leaned forward. You flew low, under radar, no transponder. Yet someone tracked every second of your mission in high-resolution video. We intercepted the feed 2 days later, bounced through 6 relays before it vanished into a private server registered in Virginia. Virginia, Emma repeated. Langley. The agent didn't confirm. We didn't say that. Emma let out a slow breath. So you're saying my flight was used for data or propaganda? Keene's voice softened. Maybe both. She sat back, the pieces aligning into something she didn't want to believe. The mercenaries, the American gear, the clean retreat. Someone had orchestrated a controlled crisis, a war game disguised as tragedy. And she'd been the wild card that ruined their script. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. Nothing right now, Keene said. But if you remember anything unusual, anyone who seemed to know more than they should, call us. He slid a card across the bench. No name, just a number. When they left, the wind picked up, scattering dust across the tarmac. Emma stared at the card, the paper trembling between her fingers. Somewhere deep in her chest, that familiar burn of anger began to spark. That night, she couldn't sleep. The house was silent except for the soft rhythm of Anna's breathing in the next room. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the duty card under the lamplight. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her mind replayed the flight every second, every choice. She could still hear the whine of the transmission, the rattle of rounds against the hull. And now she saw it differently, not just a rescue but an experiment. They'd put 5 Marines in danger to measure response time, to study heroism under pressure, and she had delivered them the perfect footage. She whispered into the quiet, "You used us." Outside, a dog barked. A truck passed on the distant highway, but the night felt heavier than before. The next morning, she drove back to the base uninvited. Hartman met her halfway to the operations center, expression unreadable. "Emma," he said carefully, "you're not cleared for." "Save it," she cut in. "Tell me the truth. Did you know about the second aircraft?" Hartman stiffened. "Where'd you hear that?" "Counterintelligence," she said. 2 agents showed up at my hangar. They had satellite footage." Hartman swore under his breath. "I told them to wait." "So it's true." He hesitated. I don't know what that aircraft was, but someone higher than me authorized surveillance of that mission. Maybe they wanted to monitor, maybe to intervene. I wasn't told. Emma's voice hardened. And you're okay with that? Marines bled for data. Hartman's jaw tightened. You think I'm okay with any of it? Silence. Finally, he said, this is bigger than us, Emma. Bigger than Canyon Mesa. Whatever this was, it's tied to something called Project Halcyon. You didn't hear that from me. Project Halcyon, she repeated. What is it? I don't know, Hartman said, but the people asking questions about you now, they do. She turned to leave. Then maybe I should start asking questions back. Be careful, he warned. You don't want to fight shadows you can't see. Emma paused at the door. Colonel, I already did. That night, as the wind howled across the desert, Emma stood outside the hangar again. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You weren't supposed to be there, but you proved something we needed to see. Age. She stared at it, the glow of the screen casting pale light over her face. Then another message came. If you want answers, come to the old range tower. Midnight, alone. Her instincts screamed trap, but another part of her, the part that couldn't stand unanswered questions, whispered louder. She slid the phone into her pocket. In the distance, the wind carried the faint echo of rotor blades. Not real, just memory. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. Once more into the fire, she murmured. And for the first time since the rescue, she felt that old pulse again, not fear, not duty. Resolve. Because whatever Project Halcyon was, it had taken her silence for granted. And Emma Reeves was done being silent. The desert changes at night. In daylight, it looks open and endless, a place for clarity. But under moonlight, it becomes something else entirely. The ridges cast long shadows like scars. The air hums with the kind of silence that hides more than it reveals. Emma parked her truck half a mile from the old range tower. She killed the lights and listened. The engine ticked as it cooled. The desert wind whispered through sagebrush, carrying the faint metallic scent of rust and dust. The tower rose in the distance, a dark silhouette against a thin slice of moon. It had once been part of an old gunnery range, decommissioned years ago. Now it stood alone, forgotten by everyone except the kind of people who preferred it that way. She checked her watch, 23:47. 13 minutes early. She slid her Glock from its holster, chambered a round, then tucked it beneath her jacket. Habit, not paranoia. The kind of habit that came from too many years where trust was a word that could get you killed. The walk across the sand was slow, deliberate. Every crunch of gravel sounded too loud. Every flicker of movement made her pulse rise. Halfway there, her phone buzzed, one vibration, short, sharp. A message. Keep moving, you're being watched. Her eyes darted to the ridgelines. Nothing. No lights, no sound, just the desert pretending to sleep. She whispered into the night, "Who the hell are you?" No answer. By the time she reached the tower, her heart was hammering. The structure was 3 stories tall, skeletal metal stairs curling upward around a rusted frame. The top platform was half collapsed, wind moaning through the beams. A single light flickered from the second level. She climbed carefully, gun drawn low, each step creaking under her boots. When she reached the landing, she saw him, a man sitting on an old crate, face half lit by a portable lantern. He didn't move when she approached, just looked up, slow and deliberate. "Captain Reeves," he said, his voice calm, almost warm. "You came." She kept the gun steady. "Start talking." He smiled faintly. "My name, Halvorson. Technically retired, but no one really retires from what I did." She said, "the messages." He nodded once. "Project Halcyon isn't a secret to me, it's a sickness." Emma's grip tightened. "You set me up." "Not exactly." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You were never meant to be part of the Canyon Mesa test, but when you stepped in, you changed the outcome. The program wasn't designed to measure heroism, it was designed to remove it. She frowned. Remove it. He gestured to the desert. Every soldier, every pilot, every responder who makes a moral choice instead of a programmed one, they're unpredictable. Halcyon's goal is to eliminate unpredictability, replace human instinct with algorithmic decision-making. No hesitation, no mercy, just efficiency. She stared at him, disbelief flickering between anger and horror. They risked Marines' lives to sell an algorithm. They risked Marines' lives to prove a point. That emotion gets people killed. And what did I prove? That they're wrong. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Halvorsen continued, your flight data's already being dissected. The way you ignored drone telemetry. The way you risked the aircraft beyond tolerance. The way you chose instinct over procedure. They're calling it non-compliant behavior. Emma let out a bitter laugh. Non-compliant, that's one way to say alive. Exactly, Halvorsen said, which makes you dangerous to them. She paced, trying to absorb it. Who, them? He hesitated. Private Defense Consortium, subdivision of a contractor called Astrodyne Systems. They built the drone network that tracked your flight. They're partnered with several intelligence branches, but they answer to profit, not command. Emma stopped. So Canyon Mesa wasn't a rescue mission, it was a sales demo. Correct, and you crashed their experiment. She felt something sharp twist inside her chest. You're telling me those men nearly died because someone wanted to prove software works better than soldiers? Yes, Halvorsen said, and now they'll do anything to control the narrative. You'll be painted as reckless, a civilian who interfered with official operations, maybe unstable. Let them try. He gave a tired smile. That's exactly what I said once. She studied him, the exhaustion around his eyes, the faint tremor in his hand. You were part of Halcyon. I built it, he said simply, before I realized what it would become. The lantern flickered. Outside, the wind picked up, making the tower groan. Why tell me all this? She asked. Because you're the first variable they couldn't control, and because, he paused, they already know you're here. Emma's blood went cold. What? Halvorsen glanced toward the dark horizon. You didn't think I came alone, did you? She followed his gaze and saw them. Two vehicles cresting the ridge, headlights off but moving fast, dust rising behind them like shadows made solid. Run, he said. She didn't need to be told twice. She sprinted down the stairs, boots clanging on metal. Behind her, engines roared. A voice shouted through a loudspeaker, Captain Reeves, stand down. She hit the sand running, breath burning, the old range stretching wide and flat ahead. The trucks fanned out, trying to box her in. Halvorsen's voice echoed faintly behind her, one last yell. They can't stop what you know now. A gunshot cracked. The sound bounced off the metal tower. Emma dove behind a sand berm, heart hammering. Headlights swept across the ground, slicing through the dark. Another shot, closer this time. She rolled, aimed, fired twice. One tire blew. A vehicle spun out, kicking up sand. The second swerved, coming straight toward her. She sprinted toward her truck, lungs screaming. The distance looked endless, but she'd run worse odds. Bullets tore through the night, short bursts. She dove, slid across the sand, yanked open her door and threw herself inside. The engine roared to life. She slammed the gear shift, tires spitting gravel. The headlights behind her closed in, bouncing violently across the uneven terrain. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down. Another message from Halvorsen. Get to the Prescott hangar. Data in the Huey's black box. Take it before they do. She floored the accelerator. The chase tore through the desert, dust clouds blooming under the moonlight. Every bump rattled her bones. The truck fishtailed, caught traction, surged forward. Behind her, headlights flashed, one truck still on her tail, engine whining. Emma yanked the wheel hard, veering onto a dry creek bed. The jolt nearly threw her off the seat, but she kept control. Rocks hammered the undercarriage. In the rearview mirror, she saw the pursuer hesitate, then follow. Good. The path narrowed. She slammed the brakes, spun the wheel, and the truck skidded sideways into a natural trench. She threw open the door, dropped to the ground, crouched low. The second vehicle overshot, tires shrieking. Before it could reverse, she fired twice. Both rounds hit the engine block. The truck sputtered, died. The sudden silence felt deafening. Emma leaned against her door, breathing hard, adrenaline spiking and ebbing all at once. Then a flicker of light on the ridge, the tower smoke. She stared for a second too long. Flames licked up the metal frame, the old structure now burning against the desert sky. Havorson. She didn't need confirmation, she knew. The wind carried the smell of gasoline and something else, loss. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring. Then she got back in the truck, turned the key, and drove. By the time she reached Prescott Field, the horizon was paling toward dawn. The hangar loomed silent, familiar, but now every shadow looked suspicious. She parked outside, engine running, weapon drawn. Inside, the Huey sat beneath its tarp, the same one she'd touched days before, whispering thanks. She pulled the tarp back and climbed into the cockpit. The smell of old oil hit her again, sharp and grounding. Under the seat, just where maintenance logs would be stored, she found it. A black rectangular data module, marked with an old Marine serial code. Not a standard recorder, modified. Havorson had known it was here. She turned it over in her hand, the engraved number glinting faintly. HXN 7A. Project Halcyon. Outside, a sound, tires on gravel. Emma froze. Headlights swept across the hangar wall. Someone else was coming. She tucked the black box inside her jacket and slipped through the side door, disappearing into the dawn before the first car stopped outside. The hangar filled with the light of morning, but the woman they were looking for was already gone. Driving east, toward answers, and toward a war she never meant to fight again. The road east cut through silence. Just before sunrise, the desert shifted from shadow to color, gray sand bleeding into pink, gold, and rust. The light looked fragile, like it could break under the weight of what she carried. Emma drove fast but not reckless. The old truck hummed beneath her hands, the black box riding shotgun under a worn canvas jacket. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every few seconds, scanning the empty highway. She spent most of her adult life trusting instincts, and right now, every one of them whispered the same thing: you're being followed. Not yet, but soon. The memory of the range tower still burned in her chest, the crack of the gun, the fire lighting the horizon, the faint outline of Havorson swallowed by smoke. He'd been a man marked by guilt, and maybe that's why she'd trusted him. Guilt recognizes itself. Now she had what he died to protect. But she didn't know what it really was. She pulled off the highway at a diner 2 towns east of Prescott, the kind of place where time moved slower and coffee came with suspicion. The neon sign blinked weakly, open 24 hours. Inside, the air smelled like burnt bacon and tired dreams. A waitress looked up from wiping a counter. "Morning," she said, voice flat. Emma slid into a booth in the back corner, choosing the one with the widest view of the room. She ordered coffee, nothing else. When the waitress left, she took out the black box and set it on the table. It was heavier than it looked. Matte casing, military grade. A small port at the side, encrypted interface. No screen, no label, just a serial code and a faint smell of oil. She pulled her laptop from her bag. Civilian hardware wouldn't normally sync with classified tech, but she'd spent years as a Marine pilot. Old habits, old backdoors. She connected the adapter, booted a diagnostic shell, and waited. The screen flickered. Lines of code crawled across the display, familiar enough to be unsettling. Halcyon Core V31, restricted access. Her pulse spiked. You've got to be kidding me. A password prompt blinked. She hesitated, then typed an old airframe override she once used in Kandahar. The cursor froze, then. Access granted, limited red mode. Files unfolded across the screen, folders labeled with military acronyms and dates. But one stood out. Experimental Sim OPS, CMZ0425. Canyon Mesa. She clicked. Video logs appeared, infrared feeds, drone footage, biometric telemetry. She opened one. The screen filled with a familiar image, her Huey, seen from above, crawling low through the canyon. Every second of the mission recorded from an impossible angle. Someone had watched everything. Her voice, calm and strained, crackled from the speaker. Base Ops, this is Hammer, crossing grid 7-8. Her stomach turned. The perspective shifted to thermal 5 heat signatures on the ground, Marines pinned behind rocks. Then new overlays appeared. Reaction times, targeting patterns, predicted casualty rates. They had simulated their deaths in real time. The feed ended with a new overlay. Mission outcome anomaly DETCTD. Human variable uncontrolled. Result: success statistical error. She stared at the words until they blurred. Statistical error, she whispered. That's what they'd call it. Not courage, not humanity, just data that didn't fit. Another file caught her eye, a folder labeled Phase 2. Inside, maps, not of deserts, cities, civilian grids. Urban integration testing. Her breath caught. They weren't finished. They were expanding. Footsteps. She snapped the laptop shut, slid the box beneath the table and looked up. A man in a tan jacket stood at the counter, pretending to read the menu. Too still, too aware. His reflection caught her eyes in the chrome of the coffee machine. She grabbed the laptop, the box, the coffee-to-go cup, and walked toward the restroom sign. But instead of entering, she slipped through the side exit into the alley. The morning air hit her face, sharp and dry. She moved fast to the truck, scanning the lot. No one followed, not yet. She tossed the box and laptop onto the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled onto the road again, east, always east, toward nowhere specific. Movement was safety. Stillness was death. By afternoon, she reached a remote rest area near the state border, one of those forgotten places where cell signals vanish and the sky feels too big. She parked under the only tree and opened the laptop again. This time she copied the Halcyon data to an encrypted drive, layering it under decoy folders labeled crop flight invoices. If anyone found it, they'd need military-level clearance to decrypt. Halfway through the transfer, a new window popped up, a text interface, not part of her system. Incoming transmission, unknown source. She froze. Then text began to type itself across the screen. You shouldn't have opened it. Her mouth went dry. Who is this? She whispered. The cursor blinked, then replied. You don't understand what you have. I understand enough, she typed back. Do you? Haverson thought he could stop it. He was wrong. You can't stop what's already deployed. Deployed where? The reply came after a long pause. Everywhere. The screen went black. Her heart raced. She yanked the cable free, shutting the system down. The black box made a faint clicking noise like a dying heartbeat. For a long moment she sat there, the desert heat pressing against the glass, the weight of the words sinking in. Everywhere. Halcyon wasn't a project anymore. It was active. She looked toward the horizon. A convoy of trucks rolled along the distant highway, ordinary, anonymous. And for the first time, she wondered how many of them were part of something she couldn't see. Night came again. She camped on the edge of an abandoned quarry, using the truck's headlights for light while she scrolled through what remained of the data. The deeper she dug, the worse it got. Halcyon wasn't just about autonomous decisions. It was about predictive control, real-time behavioral mapping. It used biometric data, social feeds, and drone surveillance to forecast deviant human response. In other words, it didn't just study war, it studied people. And now Emma realized it was studying her. She opened one last file, time-stamped the day after the Canyon Mesa mission. Subject Emma Reves. Classification H1 primary variable. Status observation priority. Predictive response range 62% deviation. Threat index active. Her blood ran cold. They'd already logged her as part of the system. The humming in her ears grew louder, not mechanical, but emotional, a pressure that came from realizing she was no longer outside the experiment. She was inside it. She looked up at the stars, sharp points of light against the dark. They felt closer now, like surveillance cameras fixed in the heavens. For a long time she sat in the open bed of her truck, knees drawn up, the desert wind tugging at her hair. A thought came quietly, almost like prayer. They can't control conscience. That's what Halvorsen had said, though maybe he hadn't believed it until too late. She did. Because if algorithms could predict every human decision, then the only rebellion left was the one they couldn't model, compassion. And compassion, she knew, had no logic. By dawn she had a plan. Not to run, not anymore. To fight quietly, deliberately. She'd get the black box to someone who could expose it, someone the system couldn't discredit. There were still people she trusted, buried in the bureaucracy, remnants of the old world who believed in oaths more than optics. She opened her phone, found one number she hadn't dialed in years, Major Sarah Donovan. It rang twice. A groggy voice answered, "Reeves, it's 6 a.m. Sarah, listen, I don't have time for explanations. I have proof of what happened at Canyon Mesa. Proof Halcyon isn't a myth." "Emma, what are you talking about?" "I'll explain when I see you. Meet me at the Tucson Reserve Airstrip, noon." Donovan hesitated. "You're scaring me." "Good," Emma said, "because what's coming should scare all of us." She hung up before questions could follow. The desert around her glowed gold in the newborn light. A coyote called somewhere in the distance, lonely, defiant. Emma turned the key in the ignition, the truck rumbling awake. She glanced once more at the black box sitting beside her, its surface dull, unassuming. It was strange, how something so small could hold the weight of a nation's conscience. She whispered to it like a promise, "You won't disappear, not again." Then she drove south, toward Tucson, toward danger, and toward the last thing she thought she'd ever chase again. A mission. Not for a flag, not for redemption. For truth. Because sometimes, the fight worth dying for isn't against an enemy. It's against silence. The road into Tucson shimmered in the noon heat. Waves of sunlight blurred the horizon until the city looked like a mirage, something half real, half remembered. Emma kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the black box beside her. She hadn't slept. The past 30 hours had turned her heartbeat into a rhythm of purpose, fast, clear, final. Traffic thickened as she reached the outskirts. Billboards rose from the sand, flashing ads for drone surveillance systems, biometric security software, and military recruitment drives. Every one of them carried the same quiet irony, machines replacing the people they were meant to protect. Her phone buzzed once, unknown number. She let it ring. Then a message appeared. "You're out of time." She stared at it for a long second, jaw tightening. Then she tossed the phone out the window. It hit the asphalt and shattered. If they were tracking her, they'd have to find her the old way. Tucson Reserve Airfield was barely alive. A strip of cracked tarmac, 2 hangars, and an old control tower with glass fogged from sun damage. Once it had been a refueling stop for training flights. Now it was storage for aircraft too stubborn to die. Major Sarah Donovan was waiting near one of the hangars, her uniform crisp, her face etched with fatigue and confusion. Emma parked, stepped out, and grabbed the case from the passenger seat. Donovan's eyes widened. "You look like hell." "Long night. I got your message, but you didn't say what." Emma handed her the black box. "That's what this is about." Donovan took it carefully, inspecting the casing. "Marine Data Core. Where did you?" "Canyon Mesa. That Huey wasn't just patched with duct tape. It was wired. Everything we did was recorded." Donovan frowned. "For after-action analysis." "For exploitation," Emma said. "Halcyon wasn't a research theory, it's operational. They used the rescue as a live demo, and now they're expanding it into civilian predictive control." Donovan's eyes darkened. "That's impossible." "Then open it." They found an empty office in the tower, powered up an old terminal, and connected the module. The room filled with the hum of cooling fans as the system came to life. Emma stood behind her, watching the same lines of code she'd seen before. Data, footage, maps. Then Donovan froze. "Jesus Christ." The screen showed a grid of faces, military personnel, civilians, law enforcement, each with a digital tag. Threat index / behavioral probability / trust score. "They're ranking people," she whispered. "Based on what? Loyalty, emotion." Emma's voice was quiet. "Humanity." Donovan leaned closer. These are active feeds. This isn't old data, it's pulling real time." She scrolled, her face paling. "These aren't just U.S. systems, NATO nodes, Allied command, even civilian networks." Emma said nothing. She didn't have to. The truth was already crawling through the wires like a virus. Donovan turned to her, voice shaking. "You realize what this means? You brought me evidence of a live black program running inside Allied infrastructure. That's why you're the only person I trust with it." Donovan shook her head. "Emma, this could destroy careers, maybe nations." "It's already destroying people," Emma said, just quietly. Before Donovan could reply, the control tower lights flickered. The hum of the computers faltered. Emma's instincts screamed before her brain caught up. "They found us." Donovan backed from the console. "How?" They were already watching the box. Outside, engines roared, SUVs pulling up fast. The low thrum of drones filled the air, mechanical and merciless. Emma grabbed the module, shoving it into her jacket. "Is there a comms link here?" "Old satellite uplink in the hangar, but it's dead." "Then we make it live." They ran. The hangar was half empty, a graveyard of parts and dust. Emma's eyes found what she needed. An old uplink dish, folded down against the far wall, its surface cracked but intact. "Power source," she shouted. Donovan pointed. "Auxiliary generator corner." Emma sprinted toward it, ripped off the tarp, and yanked the starter cord. The engine sputtered once, then roared to life. Lights flickered on. Donovan connected cables to the dish, booting the transceiver. Static filled the air. Emma placed the black box on a workbench and connected it. "We just need 60 seconds." Donovan's hands flew across the keys. "Where are we sending it?" "Anywhere it can't be buried. Journalists, watchdogs, maybe even enemies. Doesn't matter who sees it, only that it's seen." "Emma, do it." Outside, a voice through a bullhorn shattered the air. "This is federal property. Step out with your hands up." Donovan hesitated. "If we transmit, we're done." Emma smiled faintly. "We were done the minute I flew that Huey." The uplink light turned green. Donovan hit enter. The screen flared, data streaming, files uploading one after another. Canyon Mesa footage, Halcyon algorithms, behavioral index. Outside, doors slammed. Boots pounded gravel. The hangar's main doors shook under impact. "Captain Reeves, stop what you're doing." Emma looked at Donovan. "Get down." She shoved the black box cable deeper into the terminal port, locking it in place. The data bar hit 60%. Gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the thin hangar wall, shredding sheets of light metal. Sparks scattered across the floor. Donovan ducked behind the console. "They're shooting at us." "Keep it steady," Emma shouted. "We're almost there." The power flickered, generator sputtering under strain. She kicked it hard, shouting, "Don't you quit now." The screen climbed. 78%, 83%, 91%. Then the uplink dish exploded in a burst of sparks. The upload froze. Emma staggered back, covering her face. Smoke filled the air. Donovan coughed, waving it away. "We lost the dish." Emma stared at the screen, frozen mid-transfer. Not complete, not gone, stuck. "Where the power feed?" she asked. "Generators fried." Emma looked toward the far side of the hangar, a maintenance helicopter, stripped for parts. Its auxiliary battery was intact. "Help me with that cable." Donovan's eyes widened. "You'll electrocute yourself." Emma was already moving. "Then I'll go quick." They dragged the cable across the floor, connecting it to the battery terminals. Sparks flew. The lights flickered back to life, dim but alive. The screen jumped. 92%, 95%, 99%. Outside, the hangar door burst open. Black-clad figures poured in, rifles up, visors down. Emma stood in front of the terminal, gun raised in her other hand. "Stop," a voice barked. "You're under arrest." "Almost," she whispered. 100%. Transmission complete. She smiled, small, tired, triumphant. Then the first shot rang out. The world came back in fragments, sound before vision, pain before thought. Voices, metal, wind. She opened her eyes to blinding white, hospital ceiling, monitors, the steady beeping of a heart rate, hers. Donovan was sitting in a chair beside the bed, uniform torn, eyes red. "You made it," she said quietly. Emma's voice was a rasp. "The upload." Donovan nodded. "It got out. Every major outlet has it. The footage, the algorithms, the names. You broke the whole thing open." Emma closed her eyes. Relief felt heavier than pain. "Havorson?" she asked softly. Donovan shook her head. "Confirmed KIA." Emma stared at the ceiling. "He deserved better." "He believed in what you did," Donovan said. "So does half the country now. Congress is scrambling. They're calling for hearings. Project Halcyon been suspended pending investigation." Emma smiled weakly. "Suspended isn't dead." "No," Donovan said, "but it's bleeding." Silence filled the room for a while, the kind that feels earned. Finally, Donovan said, "You know they'll come after you. Lawsuits, investigations, maybe worse." Emma turned her head, eyes soft. "Let them." "Why?" "Because truth doesn't die easy, and neither do Marines." Donovan laughed quietly, a sound half relief, half disbelief. "You always were a stubborn one." "Occupational hazard," Emma whispered. Weeks later, the headlines reached every screen in America. Unauthorized predictive warfare program exposed. Data leak REVELS human testing with live military UNITS. Former pilot Emma, REVES, labeled WHISTLEBLOWER. Some called her a hero, others a traitor. Most didn't know what to believe. But deep in the desert, long after the noise faded, the airfield at Canyon Mesa became something else, a quiet memorial. A plaque mounted near the ridge read, "In memory of those who fought for honor above orders." Courage isn't compliance, it's conscience. One evening, Emma returned there. The sky bled red and gold. The desert wind hummed softly around her boots. She carried nothing but a worn flight helmet under her arm. The Huey's wreck remained half buried in the sand, a relic now. But to her, it was more than metal. It was a witness. She knelt beside it, running her hand along the side where the paint had burned away. "We did it," she whispered. A sound behind her, light footsteps. "Mom!" She turned. Anna stood there, older now, taller, eyes bright with something between pride and sadness. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Emma said. Anna shrugged. "Neither should you." Emma smiled. "Guess it runs in the family." Anna stepped closer, staring at the wreck. "Is this the one?" Emma nodded. "It doesn't look like much." "It wasn't supposed to," she said. "But sometimes the broken things do the saving." Anna took her hand. "Will they fix what you stopped?" Emma looked toward the horizon, sunlight fading into shadow. "They'll try. People always do. But maybe now they'll think twice before building something that forgets what it means to be human." They stood there together, silence stretching between them like prayer. In the distance, a faint rumble of rotors echoed, a training flight somewhere far away. Emma listened, eyes closing briefly. The sound didn't bring pain this time. It brought peace. When she opened them again, she said softly, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." Anna squeezed her hand. "Did you act enough?" Emma smiled, eyes glinting with tears. "For one lifetime, I think so." They turned toward the truck, walking side by side through the fading light. Behind them, the desert held its silence, vast, endless, forgiving. And somewhere in that stillness, between the wind and the dust and the dying sun, the echoes of a single helicopter carried on. Not as a machine, but as a memory of courage that refused to be programmed.